The movie begins on a cold, dark night as the protagonist, Young-ho, recounts some of the exceptional events happening across the globe. It is wintertime, December 31st, the year 2011. With an umbrella in his hand, Young-ho sits on a bench in a park as he thinks to himself about how it snowed for the first time in 112 years in a desert, and how a flock of penguins perished in the South Pole due to heavy rainfall. These things are most unlikely to happen, yet they did. And in that low possibility of things finally turning out his way, he draws hope. His early 20s have been spent studying for the entrance examination to enter his dream university in the city. His luck has yielded no results. He regrets giving up math in school. It is what he believes is the reason that put him in such a dilemma today. The camera zooms in beside him and a folded paper on top of a handkerchief can be seen. With his gaze pierced through the night sky, he continues reminiscing about how as a child, he once believed that rain is God's tears. With the blue umbrella painted with the figure of a girl, Young-ho waits for the rain that day. And despite the slim chances, he will continue to wait. Young-ho owns an umbrella store where he personally makes and sells different kinds, sizes and colors. Even a dog can have its own. He even gets featured in a magazine because of it. He has a talent for crafts and painting. His current project is the blue umbrella which he hand paints in his workshop inside the store. Time flashes back to spring, 8 years ago when he was still a student. It is his third time trying to pass the entrance examination for his dream university in Seoul. He failed his first and second attempts along with a few other students. For the instructor of their preparatory classes, they are like sedimentary rocks, stack up in a pile, stagnant and with no progress at all. Young-ho listens shamefully as the instructor tries to strip their hope by telling them the harsh truth that every one of them is most likely to fail. So as a bonus, just like what he did the previous year, he hangs an envelope near the board in front of the entire class. It contains 1 million Korean won, a full refund of the class fee, and a student aid. He faces them and declares that the money will belong to the first student to give up the class. No one dares to answer. After the class, Young-ho treats himself to a plate of delicious meals when a girl named Soo-jin appears beside him. She recognizes him from last year, to which he denies. She takes another stick of the food and then leaves, making him pay for what she ate. Later they meet again as Young-ho walks to the station to go home. She runs up to him and he jokingly assumes she will make him pay again, now for the fare. Turns out she knows him by name and starts calling it fate, referring to their meeting 2 years in a row. However, Young-ho dismisses her thoughts and tells her that they simply failed to get into college. When the bus arrives, he hurriedly gets inside, but before it leaves, he admits that he also knows her name. She smiles as her eyes follow the sight of the departing bus. Meanwhile, Young-ho's brother, Young-hwan, tries to convince their father to sell their leather workshop and stop working to enjoy a comfortable life, but their father wants none of that. In the middle of their conversation, Young-ho arrives, but is taken aback by the sight of his brother, who proceeds to mock him for failing again. Young-hwan then asserts that he should pay for his own class, instead of making their father shoulder the expenses. Young-ho retreats to his room and starts checking his test paper. As he stares at it, pondering about what has been happening in his life, a childhood memory pops up in his head. It was a sports day. He ended up losing in a track event when he suddenly tripped, causing a wound on his arm. A girl named So-yeon offers him a handkerchief despite being on the other team. Young-ho gets snapped back to reality when his friend arrives with a phone, his very first one despite being in the 20th century. He's kind of a traditional man and still refuses to immerse himself in technology. He shows a slight enthusiasm over the phone and immediately shifts the topic to So-yeon. He asks his friend to get her contact information, or maybe even her address, from his mother, who is the now vice principal of their elementary school. His friend is surprised about such a weird request, but Young-ho insists he just wants to return something to her. So-yeon has a younger sister named So-hee, who now works in their family business, a bookstore. After having a conversation about her not going to college with her mother, she goes to the hospital to visit So-yeon, who had fallen ill some time ago and is required to stay in the hospital to monitor her health. The nurse at the station gives her some of So-yeon's belongings, including a letter. She then drives to the ward and opens the letter for So-yeon, who cannot do so herself. She reads the letter aloud. It's from her childhood friend Young-ho, who wishes to know what she's been up to after she transferred schools. As the movie progresses, it becomes evident that So-yeon now suffers from limited mobility. She can only move her fingers to ring the bell as a response, or to call for help. So-hee uses a special character board for So-yeon to answer Young-ho's letter. Unfortunately, So-yeon does not remember him at all. So-hee returns to their bookstore, and there he meets a man whom she calls Bookworm, just for being a book nerd. He vows to read 100,000 books before he leaves Earth, and in order to do that, he must finish 5 a day. No time for sleep, according to him. So he stays even after Sohee closes the shop. She then asks him about having friends, and calling it a tragedy if he doesn't have one, but he dismisses the idea, saying it is not. He compares it to days where a sunny day is not always a good day, and a rainy day is not always a bad day. So, he finally agrees as she writes So-yeon's response letter to Young-ho. The next morning, she walks to the mailbox to drop the letter off, but something changes her mind. She rewrites the letter, but this time, the opposite of what So-yeon said. She says how she somehow remembers him and thanks him for the letter. Now it appears that she is pretending to be her sister and establishes ground rules for Young-ho. No asking further questions, no asking for meetups, and no visiting. Young-ho receives the letter in no time and smiles to himself as he reads it, having no idea that it is not from So-yeon. He stares at the letter in pure delight as he expects to receive nothing and even doubts whether he should send it or not. The day after, Young-ho handmade a leather puppy with a name that reads Happy engraved on its back. He then sends it to So-yeon. Sohee brings the puppy to the hospital and tells So-yeon that her friend made it for her. She places it on her hand and says that it is now her guardian dog. From that day onwards, Sohee, who's pretending to be So-yeon, starts exchanging letters with Young-ho. It doesn't take long until this becomes their routine. Every day, Young-ho feels excited to check their mailbox for a letter. This time, he receives it in a little blue envelope, and outside is a note that says a spell was cast on it that will make him look up at the sky. Although eager to know what's inside, Young-ho waits until he gets to the rooftop of his school to open the letter. When he finally sees what's inside, he cannot hide his confusion, as the letter appears to be inverted. A brief moment later, he finally figures it out. He flips the letter and raises it facing the sun. He can read it through the back with one of his eyes squinting from sunlight. It's like magic. In the letter, Sohee thanks him for the puppy. She lies, saying that it was placed by her pillow and said she likes the name Happy. She wishes for him to be happy too before putting a postscript that the spell is done and he can finally look down. Just as he finishes reading the letter, the girl he met after their class appears behind him and asks what he's doing. He denies reading a letter and points out the clouds. For Soo-jin, even the fleeting moments when they both look at the same sky can be considered a miracle. Young-ho jokes about her seeing everything as a miracle, and they both laugh at the thought that being sedimentary rocks in preparatory school should not repeat next year if a miracle is indeed a thing. Meanwhile, Sohee develops a friendly relationship with Bookworm as he becomes a regular at their shop. With Sohee's mother, they enjoy a nice meal together. Back at the workshop, an argument sparks between Young-ho and his brother. Their relationship has always been bumpy due to a huge gap in their academic performances and their interests. Young-hwan is the smart child, while Young-ho needs to burn the midnight oil to pass. Young-hwan wants to sell their shop and take a portion of the proceeds, but Young-ho supports nothing of it. He's always the son doing the work with his father, while Young-hwan prefers to do corporate work as he believes nothing good will come from keeping their old shop. Before it gets worse, Young-ho leaves for school and meets Soo-jin. After watching a clip on a big monitor in the city, Soo-jin tells him that her brother passed away as a high school senior. Young-ho abruptly turns his head to her. The feelings of shock and sympathy are evident on his face, not know what he should say or react. Soo-jin then asks him if he wants to spend the rest of the day with her. Young-ho then finds himself in a hotel with Soo-jin. It is a love hotel, judging from the see-through windows of the shower room. He shows a slight hint of nervousness, having to spend some time in a hotel room with a girl. Soo-jin then proceeds to tell him that whenever they sleep together, she will tell him about each of the many mothers she has. Her dad had a way with women, says her. She confesses that by just doing that, they could probably sleep together for about 4 times already. Young-ho refuses, and they end up spending the night talking about their lives. Soo-jin insists on seeing the aurora in Iceland once they get into college. It's finally summertime, so he writes Young-ho a letter talking about how she lives near the ocean. When Soo-jin sees him reading the letter, he says he is thinking about the ocean, but admits he cannot remember the feeling of summer. Soo-jin then drags him to the nearest ocean where they spend the rest of the day, instead of solving math problems. It's their first time seeing the ocean in their 20s. At the bookstore, Sohee receives a package from Young-ho. A box full of stones and seashells, and a little handcrafted boat. She then brings it to the hospital to show them to So-yeon. At night, she writes a letter again for Young-ho, talking about the rain, to which he eagerly responds to his heart's delight, assuming that she loves it. He stares at So-yeon's name written at the bottom of the paper, where So-hee almost mistakenly wrote her own name earlier. So-hee visits So-yeon, who now wishes to meet Young-ho. She appears to be reluctant, having written the letters in her place all along. Now she is stuck on whether to tell him or not. In order to ease her overthinking, she decides to visit Young-ho's workshop. Unbeknownst to her, fate has a funny way of playing with them as Young-ho visits their bookstore at the same time. They decide to wait for each other outside their shops to no avail. In the present time, Soo-jin visits Young-ho's umbrella shop, named after So-hee's interest in the rain. She read about it in a magazine and decided to meet him after being away as a travel writer. They reminisce about the time when they first talked to each other outside their preparatory classes. Before bidding goodbye, Soo-jin asks if he ever thinks about her, to which he jokingly answers, "Not so often." Autumn. So he learns the harsh truth that So-yeon only has little time left. Only a month to be mentally prepared for what's going to happen inevitably. Young-ho's family workshop is also being cleared up. It has been sold. His bitterness radiates throughout space. His father lived for 3 decades, but Young-hwan shows no care. He is smart, yet he knows nothing about their family and the things his father and brother value. As a result, Young-ho decides to suddenly quit school, leaving Soo-jin dumbfounded. Nonetheless, the order of things cannot stop Young-ho and So-hee from giving updates to each other through letters. So-hee takes a side profile photo of So-yeon and sends it along with the letter. Young-ho cannot hide his excitement and responds, finally asking her to meet on the 31st of December in front of their old school, which was demolished a long time ago and has been turned into a park. December 31st also happens to be So-hee's birthday. He leaves his phone number in his letter, but she cannot promise to meet him. They have ground rules, right from the start. He cannot ask her to meet. His phone suddenly rings, and he frantically looks for it on his study table, expecting a call from So-yeon. Turns out it is Soo-jin, who demands to see him again after he suddenly leaves without saying much. Young-ho and Soo-jin take a stroll in the park. He tells her that is where his old elementary school previously stood. She offers to tutor him, but he declines. He has been terrible at math ever since elementary, having to spend class time outside the classroom for not being able to figure out the common multiple of the numbers 4, 8, and 14. Through the window, he sees the young So-yeon with her mother leaving the school for good. He runs and tries to catch up to her, to no avail. This is the last time he's going to see her. Before finally saying goodbye, Soo-jin tells him that the common multiple of the numbers is 56, suggesting that she has known him from when they were children, back in elementary school. At the hospital, So-yeon tells So-hee how she wants to live, prompting her to make the decision to finally tell Young-ho the truth and meet him on December 31st, only if it rains. Days pass by quickly, and So-yeon passes peacefully. She was given a month to live but held on to life much longer. To cope with the loss, their mother decides to take a temporary leave. So-hee writes a letter to tell Young-ho the truth, but guilt takes over her and backs out. She cannot meet him. Even the chance of rain is against the idea of them. The next day, Young-ho visits Soo-jin to tell her that he's planning to stay in Japan to learn a new trade, and he cannot say how long will it take. He cuts their conversation short, but Soo-jin stops him and asks about the difference between her and So-yeon. She is in love with him, and she cannot do anything about it. Young-ho compares her to a star while So-yeon to the rain. Soo-jin's presence burns brightly, implying how warm he feels about her, yet So-yeon gives him the comfort he needs, like the rain. Hurt is painted all over her face the moment she hears what she needs to hear from him. She tries her best to stop the tears from falling. They share a laugh and Young-ho bids goodbye. Soo-jin then gets up from her seat not long after and yells at him. She wants them to be pen pals too. She's willing to do it even if she receives no response. After his time in Japan learning to make umbrellas, Young-ho meets with Young-hwan, who is now divorced. It is the first time he will enjoy a meal paid for by his brother. They finally put the tainted years behind their backs and mend their relationship with each other. Later, he visits their father's new workshop, still making leather bags despite age. Now, Young-ho has his own shop, but he jokingly says he only makes puppy umbrellas. From time to time, Soo-jin would visit Young-ho to catch up. Recently, her father died, but decides to tell Young-ho later on to avoid becoming funeral pals. Her humor still has not disappeared with time, and with the things she went through growing up. After their stroll around the neighborhood, Young-ho hands her a pink umbrella as a gift. A very special one, made just for her. The inside is painted, depicting the stars shining through the night sky, and the northern lights she so eagerly wishes to see back then. Tears start forming in her eyes as it brings back memories, like it only happened yesterday. She still likes him. She takes a moment to appreciate the beauty of it, before saying her thanks and goodbye. As a travel writer, Soo-jin finally sees the aurora personally, even without Young-ho. The scene rewinds back to the night they spent in the hotel. It is revealed that her brother took his own after a girl he liked in high school rejected him. A simple no would have been better, but she said hurtful things toward him that pushed him to the edge. The girl is not even curious about her brother's presence, and Soo-jin wonders if Young-ho ever finds her interesting. She cuts him off before he can answer, then leans in for a kiss. Even after having been rejected, she continues to pray for miracles to find him. The following day, Young-ho finally decides to look for So-yeon, after not hearing from her for a very long time. He stops by So-yeon's former school, where he learns she passed away from an illness. For Young-ho, it probably feels like being drenched in cold water. His smile slowly fades away as he processes what he just heard. Meanwhile, So-hee has set up a new shop, one she personally owns. After a long day at her shop, she visits her hometown to celebrate her birthday by meeting an old friend, Bookworm. The two friends catch up for a cup of coffee in Bookworm's shop by the sea. So-hee's mother still follows her passion for books by creating an online book community where she gains lots of followers, calling her Queen of the Underground. Many things have changed since So-yeon departed, and if she ever lived, they could have enjoyed a party together. Bookworm finally admits the reason why he stopped coming by to their shop years ago. Their mother asked him to write something for So-yeon to remember her, and it doesn't matter even if it's only a line or two. She wants him to promise he'll do it. Like So-hee, he's been with her until the end, making hospital visits from time to time. He'll read her a book when waiting for So-hee to come. From the letters Young-ho sent to her, Bookworm dials his number and puts the telephone on her ears. Young-ho answers. It was the time when he quit his preparatory class and walked out of the room with the money envelope in his hands. When he figures out it's So-yeon, he starts trembling, unable to form a word. During the call, Young-ho confesses his feelings toward her and tells her he waited at the park because he likes her. When So-hee learns about this, she drives to her sister's final resting place, wondering what could have happened if she had overcome her fear back then, and she let her sister meet Young-ho. She replaces the flowers and notices the unopened letters from Young-ho she left for So-yeon. In one of the letters, it reads how Young-ho asks her to keep her promise to meet when it rains. Turns out, starting from the year 2003, Young-ho waits every year on December 31st, clinging to the possibility that it will finally rain, and he will get to meet her at last. Every year he sits on the same bench waiting for the rain. It doesn't matter whether he is to serve the army, he will take his personal leave to hope for a day again. Many years pass by, yet fate shows him no mercy. Inside her car, So-hee checks the weather forecast every December 31st, starting from 2003, and there was indeed no sign of rain. Meanwhile, the figure of the girl painted on Young-ho's umbrella turns out to be So-yeon, and his reference is the picture he received through the letters. The handkerchief beside him also belongs to her, from when she offered to help him clean his wounds during the Sports Fest accident. The letter on top of the handkerchief will be his final letter to her. It will be the last time he will wait after learning of her passing. His 20s were spent waiting for the unknown. He doesn't even know what she looks like, or what her voice sounds like, yet he patiently waited for her all these years. Despite being immersed in something he passionately loves doing, he cannot escape the fact that there is something missing in him. No matter how he feels, he promises not to forget this period in his life. He has so much to say to her which he can never do due to the terrible circumstances they faced, but he still gives her thanks. She will no doubt be missed. In her car, So-hee contemplates returning to Seoul while Young-ho walks back home. He left the letter, the umbrella, and the handkerchief on the same bench where he waited for the miracle to happen. He always has this thought that maybe the miracle he was waiting for already passed, and he missed it. Or maybe miracles simply do not happen to people like him. He takes out his phone and stares at it when a raindrop suddenly falls. This is the miracle he has been biding his time for all these years. It's raining. The first thought that comes to his mind is to return to the park. He runs back as the rain pours despite knowing So-yeon will not be there. He smiles to himself as he enjoys the moment. So-hee steps out of her car, unable to make the decision. She has this thought she always believed as a child, that rain means a chance to stay together much longer. That belief did not change even as an adult. Like Young-ho, she too is waiting for the rain as a sign. Just as she finishes buckling her seatbelt, a raindrop falls on her windshield. She stares at it in surprise. Rain in winter is considered a miracle, but some say it is just because it might be a warm winter. In the park, Young-ho sits in relief on the bench, holding the umbrella he made for So-yeon. As he takes in what is currently happening, a pair of bright car headlights appear from a distance going toward his direction.